My name is Muhammed Abdul-Saaka. I come from Ghana. I come principally from northern Ghana, the Muslim part of Ghana. I came here in 1972. I was a deputy minister to the Ministry of Internal Affairs during the Dr. Buzia regime in Ghana. And before that, I had been Deputy Minister to Defense in the same government. I was elected Member of Parliament in 1969, and it was not until the coup in December 1971, the military people had a coup d'etat and seized power. They arrested every member of the government and put them in prison. And my determination was that I had done nothing wrong, and there was no reason for me to be in prison. And also, I thought that since the Prime Minister himself was here in Great Britain, and I was the only member of his government to get out, the most important thing was to come to Britain and to brief him about what had taken place and what was being done by those who had not been rounded up by the military junta. I wasn't prepared for life in Britain. So when I was coming, even the clothes I came in were not, this was in January when the weather is usually very bad, but I wasn't prepared because I wasn't prepared, I wasn't in winter clothes. I came in the normal clothes with which I escaped from Ghana. And I realized straight away that I was in real trouble because of the clothes.
You had a choice, you said, between coming here or going to America.
Yes, when I left Ghana, the first place I went to was Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. At that time, it was known as Upper Volta, and I was received very well there. And because Britain didn't have any embassy in Ouagadougou, I went to the American ambassador there to tell him what had happened and to let him know that I wanted to come to Britain so that I can meet the overthrown Prime Minister, Dr. Kofi Buzia, and tell him what happened. So they arranged the passage for me to come through to Great Britain. The American ambassador had wanted me to go to America because it was easier for him to arrange for me to do that. And I preferred to come to Britain because at that time, for example, I wasn't aware that there was a reasonable Muslim community in the US at the time. But because I had been here before, I knew that there was quite a large contingent of Muslims in Britain, especially in London.
Good. How did you first make contact with these Muslims here, especially in Kensington and Chelsea?
When I first came, the nearest contact was the people who were in the embassy and who were themselves Muslims. So it was probably much easier for me than it would have been for other people. Not so much because I was in government, but because, as I said earlier, I had been here before. And when I came, I wanted to be sure that I could get halal food, halal meat, and things like that when I came. So when I came in exile, I had a fair idea. And as I've said, some of the people whom I had seen when I first came, I looked them up, and they made things easier for me by pointing to that time. The central mosque was about the most well-known place in Britain for Muslims, but there were enclaves in Cricketwood and other places, and for halal food, for example, between, I've forgotten the name of that place, but it was between, it was near Victoria Road, which goes from Kensal Rise to Kilburn. There was a halal shop in that area, and that was the first place I started using when I arrived in this country.
So there weren't very many outlets for halal meat?
No, there weren't. There weren't. The only difficulties I had was not about so much about the halal food and other things like that, but people around me, they were not so welcoming to Muslims at that time like now. So even though there have been incidents in London and other places which make people hostile to Muslims, those days they didn't take Islam very seriously. And they looked sometimes at you, if you were dressed in the Islamic attire, as if you were in a zoo or something like that. When you came past, they looked at you differently. And presumably, most of them had their own ideas about what sort of person will dress the way you are dressed, or will be going through the sort of ceremonies you go through, and so on and so forth. But as I said, it was more the people themselves than what you could get or couldn't get.
Okay, so now because of your position before you actually came over here and you were able to tap into that Muslim community, did you then find yourself, because of your privileged position, even though you're now in exile, actually helping people who are less able to help themselves?
Yes, I did. In fact, from about 1995, we formed in this area, in Notting Hill here, we call it Colville area, we had a very strong black and minority ethnic group. And I have been the chairman of that group until now. And we help mostly black people, and particularly Muslims, because even up to now, they still have a lot of problems. And we use that group to make sure that when decisions are being made, black issues and Muslim issues are part of the discussions which lead to decisions which the government makes or which the council makes. And after a little while, in addition to serving on housing boards, like for example, Notting Hill Housing Area Board, I also had a pipeline to the government, so that when they are making immigration rules, most of the time, especially from 1997, they always sent me a dossier through the black and minority group to ask for our opinions on how the legislation should be done. And most of the time, they took the presentations which I made very seriously. And the council too, being representative of black and minority, I sat on the community relations committee. It is now called advisory group. And at those meetings, on behalf of black and minority and Muslims in the area, I would make representations about, for example, taking into account the needs of Muslim families when they are designing social houses. And as far as I know, they've now taken that on board. At that time, there was a group of, I said paramilitary because they had some, they would ship in police from as far as Manchester and other places, which had no knowledge about local affairs in this area. They had no knowledge about who lived in this area. They had no knowledge about what their needs were. They had no knowledge about how the communities were held together. They would just come in and use force to try and solve every difficulty we had in this borough. Now, eventually, I did not only become a member of representing again black and minority people of what we called at that time police community policing group, and I also became vice chair of that group, and the group met from time to time to advise the police and raise issues in this area which concerned the population here.
What advice would you give to a young Muslim living in this area now?
Now, in this area, what black and minority ethnic group did, apart from trying to articulate and bring forward their fears and concerns about council activities and police activities, was to try and let black and minority people, including Muslims, to usually reflect properly on what they think is wrong and how they think what means they will use to get the situation corrected. Now, this means that they have to learn to work in partnership with their fellow black people and in partnership with people in this borough who make decisions. Now, once you organize yourself properly and you put your fears and you communicate the means by which you intend to achieve your aspirations, then the community, the people who make the decisions will make sure that they listen to you. And when they listen to you, you have to make sure that you prepare the way you present your grievances, the way you present, the way you want the decision makers to consider your needs alongside the needs of all the other community. But the other thing too I should emphasize is that working in partnership with other groups was very, very good. And Muslims in this borough, and especially in North Kensington, have now specialized and refined the way they can make their voices heard in this borough without any resort to rancor or dispute or even the need for them to raise their voices when The people, the council, the councillors, they are all willing to listen. And as I said earlier, we had representation in most of, for example, the housing associations in this area. And we always presented the needs of the community, especially Muslim people in the community, to them, and hope that they would deal with these ones seriously when they come to making decisions. So for young Muslims in particular in this area, they now realize that they have a voice. And where there is a group who don't have a voice, they should come together and make sure that they are heard. One of the things after the July bombing, in consultation with the then Borough commander, everywhere I went, I usually dressed in a Muslim attire. And from them on, every official function I'm going, that's the way I do. And the reason was we had to be able to feed back to the Borough commander in the area and to let the leader of the council and his councillors know what Muslims felt and what other people in the community felt about Muslims. To a very large extent, the cooperation between the Muslims in this area and the police and the council made things easier. Apart from that, as I said, a lot of the community, especially around here, although they thought that it was Muslims who had done this, they had lived with us for a long time, and they realized that even if those who were supposed to have planted the bombs were Muslims, that is not what every Muslim is like. And when I used to go around, I drew their attention to the fact that, in fact, in this world, if you look at even Northern Ireland, most of these problems arise from religion. And a lot of the problems in the world, it doesn't matter what part of the world, usually they are linked to religion. But the fact that a few people in that religion have gone overboard doesn't mean that the whole religion should be castigated. And it was unfair to approach it along those lines. But as I've said, due to good public relations and having an agenda when you are going around, that it made things easier for people to understand what was happening. And for example, those people I talked to in the betting shop, I told them that one of my own cousins, his wife, was the only woman from Ghana who died in the incident. So does it mean that I, as a Muslim, should leave the religion just because of that? And you see, sometimes some of them, they listen to reason depending on the approach you adopt. You see, if you try to accommodate them and explain to them what the situation is, many people will come around to the point that being hostile is not relevant to solving whatever problem there is to be solved.
What sort of changes have you observed since the time you arrived here in Kensington and Chelsea? Yeah, what are the major changes you've observed looking back now?
In terms of Islam, the biggest changes have been the fact that in every high street you have a halal butcher shop, you have halal food, and whereas when I first arrived here, you had to travel long distances to get halal food and especially halal meat. See, that has changed. And also, when I first arrived here, if there was problem concerning blacks, it didn't seem that they didn't seem to consider that uh, even in the black communities themselves, that Muslims were also black and also needed to. But now, everywhere you go, in every black community, they recognize that Muslims and Christians and whatnot are in this area. And that has helped a great deal. The other thing which we, and I in particular, as chair of Black and Minority Ethnic Group, we managed to persuade the police that generally most of the people in a community are law abiding, but you always have a fringe of troublemakers. And what we think the police should be doing is to help we in the community to